She was invisible, the ghost at the party, laughed at by her own ex-husband and his new billionaire heiress wife. She stood there clutching a lukewarm glass of champagne, her simple vintage dress a mark of shame in a room dripping with diamonds. Every eye at the Golden Gate Patrons' Ball was on her, waiting for her to break, waiting for her to run. But they weren't prepared for what happened next. They weren't prepared for him. The one man in the room more powerful than all of them combined. And he was walking right toward her. The air at the Legion of Honor was thick with the scent of tuberose and old money. Chandeliers glittering like captive constellations poured buttery light onto the marble floors. This was the Golden Gate Patrons' Ball, the undisputed peak of the San Francisco social calendar. And Audrey Vance was a weed in an orchid garden. It had been 2 years since the divorce. 2 years since Noah Sterling, her husband of a decade, had traded her in. The trade was by all accounts an upgrade. He had swapped Audrey, a moderately successful ceramicist with a quiet laugh and laugh lines, for Danielle DeWitt, an heiress, with a face untouched by emotion and a trust fund that could destabilize a small nation. Audrey hadn't wanted to come. Her invitation was a fluke, a lingering courtesy from a museum curator who had once commissioned her work, a woman who clearly hadn't gotten the memo that Audrey was no longer Mrs. Sterling. She felt the eyes on her. Her dress, a vintage emerald green Halston she'd bought on First Dibs, had felt elegant and timeless in her small Sausalito apartment. Here, surrounded by a sea of custom Oscar de la Renta and shimmering Givenchy, it felt like a costume. Audrey, goodness. Audrey turned. It was Beatrice Finch, the sharp-tongued columnist for the Nob Hill Gazette. Her pen was a scalpel, and she was looking at Audrey as if she were a particularly fascinating and slightly moldy specimen. Beatrice, it's a lovely evening. Audrey said, her voice tighter than she'd intended. Isn't it? Beatrice's eyes did a quick, insulting scan. Up, down. How brave of you to come. Especially solo. The unsaid words hung in the air. Now that you're a nobody. Before Audrey could form a reply, a ripple of laughter, high and brittle as spun glass, cut through the orchestral swell. Danielle. She was holding court near the grand staircase, a vision in voluminous, almost offensively bright fuchsia. She was flanked by her two inseparable shadows, bits of social shrapnel named Chloe and Annabelle. And next to her, looking both proud and profoundly neutered, was Noah. He saw Audrey. His smile, the one that had once been her entire world, faltered. He looked away, turning his attention back to his new wife, who was now pointing one beringed finger directly at Audrey. Oh, God. No. But it was too late. The trio was advancing. Danielle moved like a predator, all grace and undeniable threat. Audrey, darling. Danielle cooed, her voice loud enough for everyone in their immediate vicinity to hear. She stopped just close enough to force Audrey to smell her perfume, something expensive and suffocating like a flower that knew it was poisonous. Danielle, Noah. Audrey nodded, her knuckles white on her champagne flute. I just had to come over and say how much I adore your commitment to sustainability, Danielle said, gesturing to Audrey's dress. Vintage is just so charming. It reminds me of my grandmother's attic. Chloe and Annabelle tittered on cue. And here you are all by yourself. Danielle continued, her eyes wide with mock pity. Noah isn't that sweet. She came all by herself. Noah shuffled. Sarah, come on. What, I think it's wonderful she's putting herself out there. After all, she leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial hiss. It must be so hard to re-enter the world when you've, well, you know, slipped so far out of it. It was a social execution, plain and simple. Audrey could feel the stares, a dozen pairs of eyes, all witnessing her humiliation. She looked at Noah, a desperate silent plea. Say something. Stop her. Remember me. Noah met her gaze for a fraction of a second. She saw panic guilt, and then, worst of all, nothing. He cleared his throat and looked at the ceiling. He chose his new wife. He chose the money. He chose to let her twist the knife. Audrey's eyes burned. The music seemed to fade, replaced by a rushing sound in her ears. She was trapped. Danielle smiled, victorious. "If you'll excuse me," Audrey whispered, her voice cracking. She had to leave. She would run to the bathroom, then the coat check, and disappear. "Oh, but you just got here," Danielle said, stepping slightly to block her path. It was in that moment, as Audrey felt the fragile walls of her composure begin to crumble, that the entire atmosphere of the grand hall changed. It wasn't a loud noise. It was a vacuum. The chatter near the entrance simply stopped. The silence spread, moving through the crowd like a cold front. The orchestra faltered for a beat. A man had entered. He was late, which was a power move in itself. He wasn't flanked by security, but he didn't need to be. The space just cleared around him. He was tall, dressed in a bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo that was a masterpiece of understated perfection. His hair was dark, his features sharp, and he moved with a panther-like grace that was utterly at odds with the stiff posturing of the other men in the room. "Good Lord," Beatrice Finch whispered, forgetting Audrey entirely. "It's Julian Carter." The name echoed in the silence. Julian Carter. Even Audrey, who had actively avoided society news for 2 years, knew that name. Carter wasn't just San Francisco rich. He wasn't new money tech like Noah had desperately aspired to be. He was global rich. He was the reclusive, almost mythical CEO of Carter Industries, a behemoth that swallowed competitors whole in areas from AI to green energy. He was old money lineage combined with a shark's instinct for the future. He never attended these things. Ever. Danielle's head snapped toward him. Her mouth, which had been twisted in a victorious smirk, fell slightly open. Here was the true apex predator. She immediately smoothed her dress, a flicker of avarice in her eyes. This was the only man in the city who outranked her, her father, and everyone she knew combined. Julian Carter paused at the entrance, his eyes scanning the room. They were a cool, assessing blue, and they seemed to miss nothing. The mayor started to walk toward him. A senator raised a hand. Carter gave them a curt, dismissive nod, and they stopped. He began to walk. He walked past the mayor. He walked past the senator. He walked directly past Danielle DeWitt, who had positioned herself perfectly in his path and offered a dazzling, high-wattage smile. He didn't even glance at her. It was as if she were a piece of furniture. The entire room, Audrey included, watched his progress. He was moving with purpose, his gaze fixed on her. Audrey's heart did a strange, painful lurch. He's not. He can't be. He was. He didn't slow down until he was standing directly in front of her, so close she could feel the warmth radiating from him. He was even taller up close. He looked down at her, and the cold, assessing look vanished, replaced by something so warm and intensely familiar it stole her breath. He smiled. Not a polite social smile, but a real one. A smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Audrey," he said. His voice was a low baritone, and it vibrated through her. "I've been looking everywhere for you." Audrey just stared, mute. Her brain was short-circuiting. "Who is this? How does he know my name?" Behind her, she heard a sound, a small, strangled gasp. It was Danielle. Julian Carter ignored them all. His focus was entirely, devastatingly on Audrey. He gently, firmly took her left hand. His touch was electric. "You look beautiful," he said, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "That green, it was always your color." Always. She finally found her voice, but it was just a whisper. I'm sorry. Do I?" He looked into her eyes, and in their blue depths, she suddenly saw it. It wasn't just Julian Carter, the billionaire. It was the way his left eyebrow quirked slightly when he smiled. It was the small, faint scar just below his jawline. Her blood ran cold, then hot. "Jamie," she breathed. The smile widened. "I've missed you, Elle." Before she could process the temporal shock that Jamie, her Jamie, was Julian Carter, He turned. He didn't release her hand. Instead, he drew her slightly in front of him, a protective, possessive gesture. He faced the stunned, silent group. Noah was as white as the marble columns. Danielle's face was a grotesque mask of confusion and pure, unadulterated rage. Beatrice Finch had her phone out, but her hand was shaking so much she couldn't possibly be typing. "Beatrice," Julian said, his voice now carrying the cool command she'd first seen. "Wonderful to see you. I trust you'll be the first to congratulate us." He looked at Noah, his eyes flat and cold. "Noah, Danielle, you remember my fiancée, Audrey." There is no sound quite as specific as a baccarat crystal champagne flute shattering on a marble floor. It was Danielle's. The crash echoed in the profound, stunned silence of the ballroom. 100 conversations stopped. The orchestra, attempting a transition into a piece by Vivaldi, petered out into a confused scrape of violins. Fiancée. The word hung in the air, supercharged, impossible. Audrey's head was spinning. Fiancée Jamie Julian Carter. It was a cascade of information her brain couldn't parse. She felt a wave of dizziness, and Julian's grip on her hand tightened, steadying her. "What did you say?" Danielle's voice was a venomous rasp. She had forgotten to be charming. All the finishing school polish was gone, revealing the raw, spoiled entitlement beneath. Noah just goggled, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. He looked from Julian to Audrey and back again, his expression one of complete, catastrophic disbelief. Julian didn't even look at Danielle. He was looking at Beatrice Finch, the columnist, who was now staring at Audrey as if she'd just sprouted wings. "I said," Julian repeated, his voice calm and clear, cutting through the stunned room, "that I am here tonight with my fiancée, Audrey Vance. I'm surprised you didn't know, Beatrice. I thought you were supposed to be on top of these things." It was a public rebuke, a dismissal of the woman who held the power to make or break social careers. Beatrice Finch turned a dull, mottled red. Mr. Carter, this is news." "Is it?" Julian replied smoothly. "We've been keeping it private. We're private people." He then turned his full attention to Audrey, his expression softening once more. "But tonight felt like the right time to share our happiness." He was acting. This had to be an act. A glorious, insane, protective act. But why? He leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. The movement was intimate, seen by everyone. "Play along," he whispered, his voice for her alone. "Trust me. I'll explain everything. Just trust me, Elle." Jamie. The boy who had lived on ramen noodles and optimism. The boy who had held her while she cried over a failed kiln firing. The boy who had disappeared. He was here, and he was Julian Carter. And he had just called her his fiancée. Audrey, who had been seconds from fleeing in tears, felt a new strange sensation. It wasn't courage, it was defiance. She looked at Danielle's furious, contorted face. She looked at Noah, who looked like he'd just seen his stock portfolio evaporate. She took a breath. She turned her hand over and laced her fingers with Julian's. "I'm sorry we're late, darling," Audrey said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I had trouble with well, you know." Julian's eyes lit up with a spark of approval. "It doesn't matter. You're here now." He turned back to the gobsmacked trio. "Now if you'll excuse us. I believe I promised Audrey a dance, and we need to discuss the new wing with the curator. Audrey has agreed to consult on the acquisitions." He didn't wait for a reply. He simply put his hand on the small of her back and steered her away. The crowd didn't just part. It practically recoiled, as if from a source of immense heat and light. They walked past the shattered glass of Danielle's flute. They walked past a visibly trembling Beatrice Finch, who was now typing furiously into her phone with both thumbs. Audrey didn't look back. As they reached the center of the dance floor, the orchestra, jolted back to life, began to play a slow, sweeping waltz. Julian pulled her into his arms. "My God, Jamie," she whispered, her head spinning as he expertly led her into the steps. "What have you done?" "I'm not sure," he whispered back, his hand warm and firm on her waist. But look at me, Elle. Don't look at them. She met his eyes, the familiar blue, deeper perhaps, wiser, more pained, but still Jamie. You're Julian Carter. She stated the fact, still feeling alien. I am, he said. And I'm your fiancé. You are. For tonight at least, he said. Unless you'd prefer not to be. She looked over his shoulder. Every single person in the room was staring at them, not with pity, not with contempt, but with awe, confusion, and a frantic, desperate curiosity. Danielle was being forcibly dragged away by Noah, her face a mask of thunder. Audrey looked back at Julian. No, she said, a slow, dangerous smile touching her own lips for the first time in years. For tonight, I am most definitely your fiancé. Julian danced her through one song, a polite, formal waltz that felt anything but. His hand on her back was a brand. The entire ballroom was a blur of out-of-focus faces all turned toward them. The power dynamic of the room had not just shifted, it had been detonated. Audrey Vance the Ghost was now the sun around which every satellite suddenly desperately wanted to orbit. Before the song ended, Julian leaned in. We need to talk. Somewhere private. He led her not toward the lavatories or a quiet corridor, but through a set of imposing double doors she hadn't even noticed marked Patrons Lounge. A security guard built like a refrigerator saw them recognize Julian and simply unclipped the velvet rope holding the door open. They stepped through and the noise of the gala was instantly muffled. They were in a dark-paneled library. Julian didn't stop. He crossed the room to a set of French doors and pushed them open. The cold, sharp air of the San Francisco night hit them. They were on a private terrace high above the city with a staggering perfect view of the Golden Gate Bridge lit like a string of rubies against the black void of the Pacific. Audrey walked to the balustrade, breathing in the fog. Her adrenaline was so high she felt like she was floating. She turned. He was standing by the door watching her. The shadows on the terrace were kind, stripping away the billionaire and leaving just him. Jamie, she said, the name feeling strange and right all at once. You were Jamie. My Jamie. I was, he said, walking slowly toward her. I still am. I got lost. Lost. You didn't get lost, Jamie. You vanished. You were in Berkeley with me in that drafty, awful apartment coating on a laptop held together with duct tape. We were happy. We were going to build a life. And then you said you had a family emergency in Singapore. It was, he said, his voice raw. You were gone for 3 months. You sent 2 emails. 2. I wrote you every day. I called. The number was disconnected. I thought you were dead. Or worse, that you'd just left me. I would never have left you, Elle. He was standing in front of her now. He looked tormented. What I told you was the truth, just not the whole truth. It wasn't an emergency. It was a hostile takeover, my uncle. He was trying to liquidate Carter Industries and sell it for parts after my father's accident. Audrey's mind flashed back. Your father, you said he was an engineer. You never... He was, Julian said with a bitter laugh. He engineered a global logistics empire. I am Julian Carter, as in Carter Industries. I never told you because... God, Elle. I was 22. I was terrified. Everyone I'd ever met only wanted the name. They wanted the money. And then I met you in a life drawing class you were acing, and I was failing. You were brilliant and funny, and you didn't care that I was living on instant noodles. You saw me. You saw Jamie, and I was so desperate to just be Jamie for as long as I could. He ran a hand through his hair. When I went to Singapore, my uncle froze my personal accounts. He cut my lines of communication. It was a war, Audrey. A brutal, ugly war. It wasn't 3 months. It was 8. By the time I won, by the time I'd wrestled control of the company back and had the breathing room to even think. I was with Noah. Audrey finished, the pieces clicking into place with agonizing clarity. I flew back, Julian said, his voice hollow. I went straight to the apartment. It was empty. I found you. You were at an art fair in Ghirardelli Square. I saw you. You were laughing. And Noah Sterling. He kissed you. And you were wearing his ring. Audrey remembered that day. She'd been so fragile. Noah had been charming, stable, attentive. He was the safe harbor after the storm of Jamie's disappearance. He had seemed like the answer. I broke Elle, Julian whispered, looking out at the bridge. My heart. It just shattered. I thought you hadn't waited. I thought you'd moved on. I saw him so polished and successful, and I was just this wreck who'd been through a corporate hell. I thought I'd lost my chance. So I left. I went back to Singapore. I became Julian Carter. I built my own empire separate from the family's. I buried Jamie so deep I wasn't sure he still existed. Until tonight. Audrey said, tears welling in her eyes. Why tonight, Jamie? Why now? I've always kept track of you, Elle, he admitted, turning to face her. I couldn't help it. I told myself it was just checking. I saw you get married. I saw your first gallery show. I saw when he divorced you. I saw your name disappear from the society pages. I read about Danielle DeWitt. You came here for me. No, he said, and the honesty stung. I came here because my board is pressuring me for a massive merger with SoftBank, and the investors are old-fashioned. They want a stable family man. They're trying to set me up with daughters of other billionaires. I came here tonight to tell the curator of the new wing to back off, to stop trying to play matchmaker. He stepped closer. And then I walked in, and I saw you. And she, that woman, was cornering you. And he just stood there and let it happen. The man you left me for. He let them tear you apart. And in that second, Audrey, my entire world went red. All I knew was that I had to protect you. I had to get you out of there. I had to put you so far above them they could never ever touch you again. So you made me your fiancée, Audrey said, a shaky laugh escaping her. I did, he said. It was impulsive. It was the most Jamie thing I've done in 15 years. Julian, Jamie, she started. You can't. This lie. It's huge. The Gazette. Page 6. By morning this will be global news. It will affect your merger. It will affect everything. I know, he said, and I don't care. But you did it to save me. I can't let you. Shh. He gently touched her face, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. It started that way. It started as a shield. But the moment I said it, the moment I said my fiancée Audrey, I realized something else. He looked deep into her eyes. I realized I've been a damned fool for 15 years. I should have fought for you. I should have come back from Singapore, kicked his door down, and told you the truth. I let pride and heartbreak make my decision. I am not making that mistake again. Before Audrey could respond, the terrace doors flew open with a bang, slamming against the library wall. What in the hell do you think you're doing? Noah Sterling stood there silhouetted against the light. He was drunk, and he was shaking with rage. Noah stormed onto the terrace, his face a blotchy, furious red. His tie was loose, and he was holding a tumbler of whiskey so tightly his knuckles were white. Fiancé, he stammered, jabbing a finger first at Audrey, then at Julian. You think you can just take her? Make me look like a fool. Audrey instinctively stepped back, but Julian didn't flinch. He simply stood, a calm and dangerous monolith between Audrey and her ex-husband. You're drunk, Noah. Julian said, his voice flat. Go back to your wife. My wife, Noah laughed, a broken, ugly sound. My wife is currently in the ladies' room hyperventilating. Do you know what you just did? You just humiliated Danielle DeWitt. In public. Do you know what her father will do to my new fund? You ruined me. Audrey stared, sickened. He wasn't angry that she was with another man. He wasn't even jealous. He was terrified. He was furious that her social promotion had just torpedoed his own. Let me get this straight, Julian said, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. You are angry not because you lost Audrey, but because you backed the wrong horse. Noah sputtered. She was my wife. She's a Potter, and you waltz in and what, you're engaged. It's a lie. You're lying. Tell him you're lying, Audrey. Don't you dare speak to her, Julian snapped, and for the first time Audrey heard the ice-cold authority of the CEO. Julian took one step toward Noah, who instinctively recoiled. You made yourself look like a fool, Noah. Julian said, his words like chips of ice. You did it the moment you let that vapid, cruel woman corner your ex-wife. You did it every day for the last 2 years that you let Audrey, the best thing that ever happened to you, feel small so you could feel big. You don't know anything about us, Noah yelled, emboldened by the whiskey. I know everything, Julian countered. I know she supported you for the first 4 years of your marriage while you were finding yourself. I know she sold her own art pieces she loved to fund your first failed startup. I know that the second you had a taste of success, you found her quaint and unambitious. You traded a woman of substance for a brand name. You didn't divorce a wife. You liquidated an asset you no longer understood the value of. And you do, Noah sneered. What's this, Carter? Some kind of billionaire pity project? Find the sad little ex-wife and dress her up. Julian smiled. It was a terrifying expression. You still don't get it, do you? You think this is new? You think I'm a stranger? Julian looked at Audrey, a quick, silent question. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Tell him. She didn't meet me tonight, Noah, Julian said. I met Audrey Vance 15 years ago in Berkeley. We lived together. We were in love. She knew me when I was Jamie, a broke coder in a drafty apartment. She loved me. Not the name, not the money. Noah's face went from red to a sickly pale gray. The comprehension dawned with dawning abject horror. Wait. Jamie. The one from college. The one she was with before you, Julian clarified. The one she left because I was incommunicado fighting a war you can't even comprehend while you were whispering sweet nothings and offering her stability. Second twist. I'll tell you something else, Noah. When I was Jamie living in that awful apartment coding my first algorithm, I wasn't broke. I was already a millionaire. I was testing a theory. I was testing her. I wanted to know if she loved me or what I could be. And she passed. She loved me. She wanted to build a life from scratch. You were the one who cared about the money. You were the one who couldn't see the diamond because you were too busy looking for glitter. Noah looked as if he'd been physically struck. He staggered back, leaning against the balustrade. No, that's not possible. He was doing the math. He realized the scale of what he had thrown away. He hadn't just divorced a Potter. He had divorced the one true love of Julian Carter. You didn't just dump your wife, Noah, Julian said, his voice pitiless. You dumped the woman who passed the test you would have failed. And now you're upset that the diamond you discarded is being set in a crown. That, as I believe they say, is a you problem. The terrace doors opened again, this time more slowly. Danielle stood there. Her makeup was slightly smeared, her eyes red-rimmed and venomous. Noah, we are leaving, she hissed. You are an idiot. Noah looked at his new wife, his face a canvas of regret and despair. He looked at Audrey, who was standing tall, her hand now linked with Julian's. He looked at the man who had in the span of 10 minutes taken back the woman he'd thrown away and simultaneously destroyed his social and financial future. Without another word, Noah Sterling turned and followed his wife, a defeated, broken man. The terrace was silent again, save for the distant sound of the city and the faint swell of the orchestra inside. Audrey was shaking. The entire confrontation had been brutal, primal. She turned to Julian. "Thank you," she whispered. "Jamie, that was... I've never had anyone stand up for me like that. Not even... Well, he never deserved you," Julian said simply. He took off his tuxedo jacket, and in a gesture so familiar it made her heart ache, draped it over her shoulders. It was warm and smelled faintly of him. "But Julian," she said, huddling into the jacket, "what you said, it's still a lie. We're not engaged. You've just torpedoed your SoftBank merger and declared war on the DeWitt family. For a ruse. To save me from a moment of embarrassment." "It wasn't a moment," he said, turning to look at the bridge. "It was the sum of 2 years of moments. And as for the merger, let me worry about that." "No, I can't let you. Tomorrow you can release a statement. Say it was a misunderstanding. That I'm just an old friend. I'll go to Napa for a week. I'll disappear. They'll forget." "Will they?" He turned back to her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "And will you go back to being the ghost? The invisible woman?" I don't know." He took her hands. "I have a confession, Elle. What I told Noah was mostly true, but I wasn't just protecting you tonight. I was being selfish." "What do you mean, Yee?" "The merger, the board. It's all true. They've been pressuring me to marry for a stable image. They've paraded a line of suitable bloodless heiresses in front of me for months. I've rejected them all. My board is unhappy. They see a single 40-year-old CEO as a loose cannon, a liability." He took a deep breath. "When I saw you tonight and I said those words, my fiancée, it wasn't just a shield for you, it was a shield for me. And the second I said it, I knew it was the only answer." Audrey pulled her hands back. "So, what you want to use me? You want me to be your stable image?" The accusation hung in the cold air. "No," he said, his voice pained. "No. That's not... Elle, look at me." She met his gaze. He was vulnerable. The billionaire was gone. This was Jamie. "This is a crazy idea. It's insane. But what if we made it real? Not a lie for the press, but a real engagement. A chance. We're not those kids in Berkeley anymore. We're two different people shaped by a lot of pain. But maybe we could be something better. I don't want a pretend fiancée Audrey. I don't want a stable image. I want you. I want to see if Jamie and Elle still exist." Audrey was speechless. This was not a rescue. This was a proposition. I need time, Jamie. This is everything, all at once. My ex-husband, you, your life." "I know," he said gently. "I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I'm asking you to not run, to stay, to let me court you, to let me show you who I am now, and to relearn who you are." He reached into his pocket. Audrey's heart stopped. He pulled out a ring. But it wasn't a small, simple ring. It was without a doubt the most magnificent, terrifying diamond she had ever seen. It was a flawless 10-carat Asher cut set on a simple platinum band. It blazed even in the dim light of the terrace. "Oh, Julian, no," she whispered, recoiling. That's not me. That's Danielle." "I know," he said, his lips twitching. "This was my grandmother's. It's the Carter ring, the one my board wants to see, the one the world expects." He held it out. "I'm not asking you to wear this for me, or even for us. I'm asking you to wear this for them." He nodded back toward the ballroom. Wear this as armor L. Wear it as a shield. Let it be the thing that stops the whispers and the pity. Let it be the thing that gives you the space you need to think. He wasn't proposing. He was arming her. Slowly, Audrey looked at the ring. It was a fortress. It was a statement. It was everything she'd just been humiliated for not having. She held out her left hand. For tonight, she said, her voice clear. And for tomorrow, for the space to think. He smiled a true brilliant smile. For as long as you need. He slid the ring onto her finger. It was heavy. It was cold. It was impossible. It's a bit large, she whispered. It'll stop traffic, he agreed. Ready to go back in. Audrey. Vance took a deep breath, the weight of the Carter diamond on her hand, the weight of Julian's jacket on her shoulders. She looked at the man beside her, a ghost from her past, a stranger, and terrifyingly her future. Yes, she said. When they re-entered the ballroom, the effect was instantaneous. The orchestra was playing, but the music was secondary to the furious, hushed gossip. Beatrice Finch, the columnist, saw them. Her eyes zoomed directly to Audrey's left hand. Her jaw dropped. Audrey Vance, the ignored ex-wife, was no longer a ghost. She was a queen, and she had just taken the throne. The next morning, Audrey's small, sunlit apartment in Sausalito felt like the eye of a hurricane. The world outside had not just noticed her. It had detonated in her name. Her phone, which she'd finally retrieved from her purse at 3 a.m., was a smoldering brick of notifications. It had vibrated itself off the nightstand twice before she simply put it on silent, watching the screen light up with a relentless, silent strobe of calls and texts. It was a beacon of a life she didn't recognize. Her laptop, open to the Nob Hill Gazette, was headlined by a fawning, breathless column from Beatrice Finch. The title was set in an obnoxiously large font. Carter's surprise heiress, reclusive billionaire Julian Carter, engaged to artist Audrey Vance. A love story for the ages. A love story for the ages, Audrey muttered, sipping her tea. She wrote that 6 hours after wanting to see me publicly executed. The article was a masterpiece of social revisionism, painting Audrey as a brilliantly talented reclusive artist, rid poor and a mysterious figure, rid invisible, who had clearly been in a secret passionate love affair with the world's most eligible bachelor for years. Beatrice had, of course, sensed their deep connection from the moment she saw them. It was everywhere. Page 6 had a grainy photo snapped from across the ballroom of Julian sliding the massive Asher-cut diamond onto her finger. The Daily Mail had a rival, even blurrier shot of Noah Sterling, his face a mask of apoplectic rage, being physically steered out of the gala by a furious-looking Danielle. Forbes had already published a 1,000-word speculative piece on what this surprise union with an unknown meant for the upcoming SoftBank merger. Her email inbox was a similar disaster zone. It was a digital stampede of people who 24 hours ago wouldn't have given her the time of day. The most galling was from Galerie Antoine in the financial district. The owner, Etienne, a man with a tiny ponytail and monumental disdain, had personally rejected her work just 4 months prior, calling her sculptures a bit too rustic for our clientele. His new email, sent at 5:04 a.m., was dripping with sycophancy. My dearest Audrey, I was so hoping to run into you last night. My profound congratulations on your wonderful news. Julian is a longtime patron, and we are simply ecstatic for you both. I've been reconsidering your Earthly Vessels series, and I believe I was mistaken. The pieces have a raw, powerful honesty that the market is crying out for. I would be honored if you would consider my gallery for your next solo show. September, perhaps. Our biggest month. Let's make it happen. Warmest regards. Etienne. She closed the laptop with a snap. Then came the voicemails. Old college friends she hadn't heard from in a decade, all so happy for her, all needing to catch up immediately. Her parents had left 7 messages, a frantic, escalating volley of confusion. Is this a joke? Excitement? A billionaire Audrey? and practical worry. But what about Noah? Is this legal? And then in their own special category were the texts from Noah. They were a perfect chronological diary of a man's complete psychological disintegration. 1:12 a.m. Audrey, you can't be serious. 1:45 a.m. This is a joke. You're doing this to hurt me. It's pathetic. 2:30 a.m. Danielle is. This is a mess. We need to talk. You don't know what you've done. 3:15 a.m. Her father is pulling his seed funding from my new venture. He's pulling it. You've ruined me. Are you happy? 4:05 a.m. He's not who you think he is, Audrey. He's a shark. He'll crush you. He's using you. 6:15 a.m. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. For everything. Please, call me. 7:30 a.m. I still love you. I've always loved you. Audrey stared at the last one. The lie was so profound, so desperate, it made her feel nauseated. She held her thumb over the block button, then stopped. Not yet. She wanted to remember this. Instead, she just deleted the entire thread. She walked to her window overlooking the gray-green waters of the bay. She was wearing an old paint-stained sweatshirt and leggings, but on her left hand the Carter diamond felt like a beautiful, heavy monster. It was cold. Every time she moved, it caught the morning light and threw blinding, arrogant prisms of color across her walls. It was a fortress. It was a cage. The night had been a surreal whirlwind. After Noah and Danielle's disastrous exit, Julian had been the perfect gentleman. He'd stayed for another 45 minutes, just long enough to be seen. He'd introduced her to the museum's curator as my fiancée, the artist Audrey Vance, and the woman had nearly fainted with delight, immediately promising to commission a piece for the new atrium. Then he had driven her home not in a Rolls-Royce or a Maybach, but in a quiet, dark gray Audi. He'd walked her to her door, his tuxedo jacket still draped over her shoulders. The silence in the car had been thick, not with awkwardness, but with 15 years of unsaid things. At her door he'd taken her hand. He hadn't tried to come in. He'd just looked at her, his expression one of profound, unreadable emotion. Sleep, he'd said, his voice low. The world will be loud tomorrow. Ignore it. I'll call you in the morning. We'll just have coffee. Away from all this. He'd leaned in and kissed her, but not the way she'd half expected, half feared. He'd kissed her on the cheek, a gesture of simple, profound tenderness. Now in the quiet of her apartment, she was still wearing his jacket. It was on the back of her chair, smelling faintly of him, a scent of expensive wool, cold night air, and something else. Something familiar. She was nursing her second cup of tea, her mind a jumble of past, present, and an impossible future, when there was a knock on her door. Not the buzz from the downstairs lobby. A sharp, direct knock on her actual apartment door. Audrey froze. Her blood ran cold. The press. They found me. They've gotten past security. Her sanctuary was breached. She crept to the door, her heart hammering. She looked through the peephole. Her breath caught. It was him. No security. No suit. He was wearing dark jeans, a simple charcoal gray Henley that stretched across his shoulders, and the same worn brown leather boots she remembered from 15 years ago. He was holding a cardboard tray with 2 large paper cups. She unlocked the deadbolt, her hands shaking, and opened the door. He smiled. Not the cool, assessing smile of Julian Carter, not the polite, charming smile from the gala. It was the Jamie smile, the one that was slightly crooked, the one that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "I figured you'd be out of coffee," he said. I brought Blue Bottle. I remember you said it was the only one that didn't taste like sadness and regret." A laugh, real and rusty, escaped her. "I did say that, didn't I?" "You did." His eyes met hers, and the noise of the world seemed to fade. "Can I come in?" "Oh, yes, of course." She stepped back, suddenly hyper-aware of her messy apartment, the clay dust on the floor, her own paint-smeared sweatshirt. He stepped inside and his presence seemed to fill the small space. But he didn't look at the mess. He looked at her world. His eyes traced the shelves full of books. He walked to her work table, gently touching a small, flawed ceramic bird. "You kept this one," he said, his voice soft. "The kiln cracked it and you were furious. You said it was ruined." I remember," she said, stunned. "I told you the crack was what made it beautiful," he finished. He turned to her. "It's perfect, Elle, all of it. It's you." "It's not the Legion of Honor," she said, taking the coffee he offered. It was hot, and the gesture was so normal it was jarring. "Thank God for that," he said. They stood in an awkward, charged silence. The world's newest, most famous couple standing in a small Sausalito kitchen surrounded by clay dust. "The world is going crazy," Audrey finally said, gesturing to her dark laptop. "Let it," Julian replied. "I'm not here about the Nob Hill Gazette, or the merger, or Danielle DeWitt." He looked at her, his expression suddenly serious, vulnerable. "I'm here for coffee, and I'm here because I meant what I said last night, all of it. I don't want to pretend. I don't want an arrangement." Audrey's hand tightened on her cup. "Jamie? Julian, I don't know what to call you." "Call me Jamie," he said, his voice urgent. "Please." "Jamie," she said, testing the name. "This," she held up her left hand and the diamond flashed, "is the biggest arrangement in the world. This isn't Jamie and Elle. This is Carter Industries and the Potter." His face tightened as if she'd struck him. "You're right, it is." He took a deep breath. "Which is why I need you to give it back to me." Her heart didn't just drop. It plummeted, smashing into the pit of her stomach. Of course, it was a one-night rescue. The show was over. He was here to retrieve his property. She was the fool, the Cinderella whose carriage was turning back into a pumpkin, leaving her covered in clay dust. "Oh," she said, her voice flat, all the warmth gone. "I see. The armor is no longer needed." She began to twist the massive diamond off her finger, her knuckles white. "Audrey, wait. That's not—" "No, it's fine," she said, her voice brittle. "I get it. It was an incredible gesture. You saved me. And now, you need your grandmother's ring back. Thank you. For the loan." She was Audrey the transaction all over again. She pulled it off and held it out to him, the space between them suddenly a cold chasm. He looked at her pained, angry face, then at the ring in her hand. He didn't take it. Just for a second, Elle," he said quickly, his voice pained. "Put it on the counter." Confused, she dropped the ring on her kitchen counter. It landed with a heavy, expensive clack. "That ring," he said, "was for them. It was armor. It was a statement. It was a tool. It was the loudest thing I could say without speaking. It wasn't a gift. It was a weapon." He never took his eyes off her face. He reached into the pocket of his jeans, not a tuxedo, and pulled out a different box. A small, worn, dark blue velvet box. It wasn't from Harry Winston or Cartier. The velvet was faded at the corners as if it had been carried for a very, very long time. "This," he said, his voice thick with an emotion that made her own throat tighten, "is for you." He opened it. Audrey's hand flew to her mouth and a sob escaped her. It wasn't a diamond. It was a sapphire. A deep, perfect cornflower blue bezel-set sapphire flanked by two tiny twinkling diamonds on a simple antique gold band. You remembered," she whispered, tears blurring her vision. "I remember everything, Elle," he said, his own eyes shining. "I remember the antique shop on Telegraph Avenue. You were 23. You dragged me in. You saw this. You said diamonds were too loud, that they were for people who needed to shout." "And sapphires," she whispered, the memory rushing back, "are like holding a piece of the sky." "We couldn't afford it," she said, the tears streaming freely now. "It was $400. We had to pay rent." I went back the next day, Julian said, his voice cracking. I sold the only thing I had of value that my uncle hadn't frozen, my grandfather's watch. The one I told you was just a knockoff. I bought this. I was going to give it to you that night. But you left, she choked out. I put it in my bag for the flight to Singapore, he said. I thought I'd be back in a week. And then the world fell apart. I've been carrying it for 15 years, in briefcases, in coat pockets, in safes. It was my penance. It was my compass, to remind me of the one time I was a man I was proud to be. I've been carrying it, waiting for you. He took her left hand, the one that felt so light and bare without the 10-carat fortress. This isn't armor, Audrey. This isn't for the board. This isn't a lie, and it's not a tool. This is a question. He looked up and she saw him. Not the billionaire, not the savior, just Jamie. Her Jamie, his heart in his eyes. I'm not asking you to be my fiancé for the world. I'm asking if I can be Jamie again, and if you'll be my Audrey. She was sobbing now, a messy, cathartic, cleansing cry for the girl she'd been and the woman she'd become. She didn't say anything. She just nodded, her entire being shouting the word. Yes, she finally whispered. Yes, Jamie. Yes. He smiled a smile of pure, unadulterated relief and slid the sapphire onto her finger. It fit perfectly. It wasn't cold, it wasn't heavy, it was warm. It wasn't a cage, it was a home. He pulled her to him and he kissed her. It wasn't a chaste kiss on the cheek. It was 15 years of waiting, of regret, of fame, of loneliness, and of a future that had impossibly found its way back to them. The parenthesis of 15 lost years was finally closing. On the counter the Carter diamond lay forgotten, its fire dimmed by the morning sun. Outside the world could clamor and speculate. The phones could ring. The Danielles and Noahs of the world could rage. It didn't matter. The diamond had been a statement to the world. The sapphire was a promise to her. The ghost at the gala was gone. And Audrey Vance was finally truly seen. Audrey's story isn't just about revenge. It's about being seen. It's about how the people who broke you can never be the ones to define you. The world tried to tell her she was nothing but the right person. The person who reminded her she was everything. What do you think Danielle and Noah did the next day? Do you believe in second chances, even with a 15-year gap? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If you loved Audrey's journey from an invisible ex-wife to the most talked-about woman in the city, please hit that like button. It truly helps our channel and tells us you want more stories just like this. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss a single dramatic twist. You won't believe whose story we're telling next.